Hi there folks, it's Tim, Golf 5, Tango Mike. I hope you're keeping well. Today we're going to have a quick look at off-centre fed dipoles. Well, thanks for stopping by. If this is your first visit to the channel, then think about clicking that subscribe button and the notification bell for any future videos. Give me a thumbs up as well if you like it. And if you're a regular or somebody who's been here before, great to have you back. So the off-centre fed dipole operates on the premise that you can alter the feed point impedance. And typically with the off-centre fed dipole design, it's the same overall length as a full sort of half-wave dipole, if you like. So for 40 metres, it would be about 20 metres long, 66 feet, something like that. But of course, a typical 40-metre half-wave dipole is fed in the centre with coax. Now, this antenna is fed with coax, but not in the centre. So with a normal half-wave dipole, if you like, a centre-fed one, you get an impedance of around somewhere between 50 and 70 ohms, depending on one or two factors. Like, for example, if you've got the legs straight out, you're going to be around nearer to 72 ohms. If it's inverted V, it'll get nearer to 50 ohms. And of course, the lower you are to the ground, then the more that changes the feed point impedance as well. It usually brings it down. So a few factors into play there. But what won't be changed is if you move the feed point away from the centre of the dipole to one of the ends, doesn't matter which one, then you'll increase the impedance. And in this case, with a typical off-centre fed dipole, say we've got one 66 feet long, then instead of feeding it in the middle, the 33 foot, the 10 metre point, you'd feed it 1/3 along on whichever side would suit you. So you probably feed it, what you would feed it is around 1/3 of the way. So for 66 feet, that'll be around about 22 foot. And then you have 22 foot, the feed point, and then 44 feet for the rest of it. Or the other way around, doesn't really matter which way. And that's how it works. And that allows the antenna to bring in some other bands. And let's see how it does that. So when we move the feed point away from the centre, as we said, we increase the impedance, and typically to around 300 ohms. But don't forget, it does also depend a little bit on the configuration of the antenna and also how high it is above the ground in relation to that longest or lowest frequency, if you like. Because don't forget, we're talking here at this stage about 40 metres, because it's 66 foot long. So we get around 300 ohm impedance there at that feed point stage, 1/3 of the way along the antenna. And then we have to transform that into a match for our coax, our 50 ohm coax. So typically a 6-to-1 or a 4-to-1 current balun is used to do that. And that brings in the fundamental frequency. In this case, for a 66 foot dipole, that would be 40 metres. We also then have some harmonically related bands as well. So we get 20 metres out of the antenna, we get 10 metres out of the antenna as different bands. But of course, the one thing we shouldn't forget is that unlike 40 metres, where we know we're going to get around 300 ohms at the feed point in terms of impedance, we could get markedly different impedances for 20 metres and 10 metres. So typically, not always, but typically you need some form of tuning, maybe an internal tuner in your radio to maybe bring those other bands in a little bit as well. Now, the one band I haven't mentioned when you're thinking about harmonically related bands to 40 metres would be 15 metres, because that's 7, 14, 21 megs. Well, why doesn't 15 metres work? Well, there is a slight problem with the traditional 1/3, 2/3 designs for off-centre fed dipoles. If you got it at the full 66 foot length for 40 metres, because unlike the normal centre fed dipole for 40 metres, which would normally have a third harmonic relationship with 15 metres, this one doesn't. So with a normal half-wave dipole on 40 metres, you'd usually have 15 metres coming in a little bit high on 15 metres, around 21,400 I should say, or higher. But you can bring it in, you can maybe add a couple of pigtails somewhere to bring it in, or you could just tune it in with your onboard tuner, and you can use 15 metres with a 40 metre dipole. Now, you can't with an off-centre fed version. So some people come up with the option, for example, of having a quarter wavelength sort of matching bit on the antenna made out of 300 or 450 ohm ladder line, which helps to bring 15 metres in. That in itself creates a problem because you then need a dual ratio balun. You need the 1-to-1 balun to bring in the 15 meter, as well as the 4 or 6-to-1 to bring in the other bands. Gets a bit complicated then, doesn't it? And there are other options as well. Another design shifts the feed point even further away from the centre to around fractionally over a sixth of the way along, right? So we're getting towards the end now, aren't we? And apparently that design brings 15, 20 and 10 into a good SWR, less than 1.5-to-1, and still leaves 40 at around 3.5-to-1. So you can still use your onboard tuner. Now when we look at all these different options, we look at maybe the lack of 15 meters on the 66-foot version with the 1/3, 2/3 split. We look at some of the ways in which they try to bring 15 meters into this antenna. And I know that the higher bands aren't all that busy at the moment, although there have been some openings. But even so, it does seem to me like a bit of a fiddly design. One typical issue people tend to have with off-center fed dipoles, however, is common mode, because we are feeding an antenna away from the centre. We've got an unbalanced antenna in many ways, haven't we? 1/3, 2/3, whatever way you want to do it. And often that brings along the issue of common mode, RF in the shack. So people often, as well as having to have a good current balun at the feed point, whether it's a 4-to-1 or a 6-to-1 or whatever they've got, often have to provide choking as well on the coax before it enters the shack. If you've any sort of power with them, they can be quite a fiddly antenna in terms of providing common mode issues as well. So that's another thing that some people do find problematic with off-center fed dipoles. Now, the actual fact that you can feed the antenna a third of the way along might help people with certain configurations according to their garden or their yard, you know. So it could be that the shack is positioned in such a way that really, to get a decent antenna, they might need to have the feed point further away from the centre at one end of the antenna to allow the antenna to be put up and fed properly as into the shack. So maybe that will be a reason for using them. And, you know, they look a single wire antenna and you can get a few bands out of them, and that's brilliant. But for me, I think there are better options, in my view, less fiddly and better performers. The end-fed half wave, 66 feet of wire, you feed it with a 49-to-1, you get 4 bands. There's no need for tuning stubs. There's no need for a dual ratio balun. There's no need to actually use much of a tuner at all, if at all, right? Because you get 40, 20, 15 and 10, usually with an SWR less than 1.5-to-1, no need to mess about. Single wire antenna as well, and of course you can feed it in any, you can feed it either end. You can put it as a sloper, inverted V, inverted L, so you've got actually more flexibility in terms of the configuration itself as well. The other option I often use is the doublet. You don't even need 66 feet of wire to really get 40 meters in the doublet. 50 feet, 44 feet will get you 40 meters and up. I would prefer probably not to bother with an off-center fed dipole. I would probably go with either a fan dipole. I would either go with a doublet, ladder line fed. I would probably maybe decide to go with an end-fed half wave. And if I had a bit of extra room, I might even put up a G5RV or a ZS6BKW. I don't know. I'm not sure. The off-center fed dipole just seems like an awful lot of work. Now, some people I know love them. One thing I will say, though, is I've been on 40 meters in the last couple of months. And what I've been trying to do is get people's working conditions, what radio they work, but also more importantly for me, which antenna they use on 40 meters. Because I'm doing a little sort of survey, if you like, and trying to see what, or which antennas, I should say, people tend to use on 40 meters, asking operators usually in the UK, Ireland, and around sort of northern central Europe, you know. And I'm doing it for 2 months. I've had about 100 responses so far. Just been tallying it slowly. I'm making sure I don't ask the same person twice. So I'm putting it in my logging software, so I know if I've asked them before, I won't ask them again, you know. And out of all that, I've only had one person so far who uses an off-center fed dipole, which is interesting. I thought they'd be a lot more popular. I'm not going to reveal which ones are the most popular because that's for a different video. But The off-centre fed dipole is trailing. One person, just one person, I've had so far use one. Now you might use one, you might have used them before, you might love them, and I'm sure there are people out there who swear by them. Personally, I think maybe they're a bit of a faff, a bit of a fiddle, but let me know if I'm wrong, let me know what you think, put your comments down below. Anyway, great to have you with me, thanks for watching, I hope you're staying safe, I hope you folks are too, and that we're in the UK at the moment, we're in the middle of a lockdown. I just hope that, if you are in a similar position wherever you are, that you're staying sane, you're staying safe, and that you're enjoying your radio a little bit as well. 7-3, thanks for watching, take care, and if you haven't clicked subscribe, it'd be lovely to have you on board. 73 from G5TM, bye-bye.